The biggest Fortnite event of the year has just ended, and unfortunately this tile here dictated who actually ended up winning the entire tournament and the championship. The final head-to-head went down between Queasy and Vino, the top pick to pretty much win the entire tournament, and Poland, BL's, Kami and Seti as well. So what normally would happen is that Queasy and Vino were landing up to the north of Sleepy Sounds in every single match. However, coming into the final game, they were 12 points behind. So they made the very risky play of switching their drop spot to land on top of Kami and Seti. If they wipe them, they win the entire tournament. So somehow, even though it wasn't their drop spot, they managed to out-drop Kami and Seti in this area, which means they got the guns first. And I'm just going to play the full clip out for you first because this is one of the best moments in Fortnite history.
Had that best drop at that time. What is this? What is this? Queasy, Vino are trying to take it by force.
You only win in one way, and that's taking that crown. Vino is here. Queasy is here. Down goes Seti. It's a big trade. It's a one-on-one. This has to be one of the most explosive head-to-heads we have ever seen. Vino has to get this thirst here. He knows now it means everything. We might as well seal this deal. Why wait?
Bubble shield going out. He's trying to bait it. He's trying to bait the revive so that way Kami might peek. Breaks through the wall. Shot's gonna be fired. And they do it. Become Legends are on top.
Become Legends has officially managed to win the biggest fight of their career.
Now you may ask, what role does this tile play in this fight? The engagement starts by Queasy managing to pick up a shot onto Seti, but that one bullet that Seti hits back in return is absolutely pivotal in ensuring they end up winning this fight. Despite the awkward left-hand peek, Kami manages to trade back onto Queasy and pick him up, knocking him out, making it now a 1v1 situation between Kami and Vino. Whoever wins this 1v1 wins the entire championship. They try and bait each other out a little bit, moving back and forth, left and right, but ultimately Kami tries to break through the wall as he has barely any materials, and actually notices that he places a ramp behind him. So his intent was to break through the wall, place a ramp in front of him to block himself off, but he actually did this too early before the wall was broken, and he ended up placing this behind him. So this was a little bit of a fumble from Kami's perspective. But on the flip side of that, Vino hits him with a big chunk shot and follows that up by trying to place a wall to block him off. And this tile right here is actually a small archway that you can't build on, so he was completely blocked from building here, meaning that Kami was able to come through and pick up an elimination and finish it off. Unfortunately, Vino also ended up missing the crucial final shot onto Kami, which would have been able to pick him up and win them the fight. So it quite literally came down just to a 1v1 aim duel. Very similar to the FNCS Solo All-Stars in Chapter 2, Season 7, when it was him versus Tayson. This is now the second time, I don't want to say it because it's brutal, but it's the second time where it's been a crucial 1v1 to win an FNCS title, and Vino has not managed to hit the correct shots. A lot of people don't like these zero build areas. I am indeed one of them. However, if there's a POI that they had dropped at really frequently, they would have the understanding that this is somewhere they cannot build and a tile that would mess them up. So potentially he wouldn't have made this mistake. This is of course the risk you run when you switch to someone else's POI that they know better than you. And what's interesting is that the domination of Queasy and Vino on day number 1 was pretty much the entire storyline. In day 1, there was 2 games where Vino and Queasy ended up going down to Storm Surge, and in all 4 of the other games, they were on height. When I started to look through all of the list of the teams in the lobby, just no one was going for height at all. There are basically 2 main contenders who could have taken it from them, which would have been Aqua and Reason alongside Tayson and Chapix, which on EU has pretty much been the entire story for the entire of this chapter, this full year of 2022, and both of those 2 were fighting each other off spawn. So in day 1, I'm not gonna lie, for Queasy and Vino, it looked like the easiest games that they've ever played in their life. Height was so free that even in game number 5 or 6, I can't remember which one, Epic Whale and Reek got bitched off of height by Refsguard, who had 80 HP. And he was just like a solo by himself, 8 HP, and people were so not focused on high ground that he managed to take it solo. One of the other wins from height was Scented and Cold, who managed to actually stop a bit of the reign of Queasy and Vino in game number 2, one of the only teams who was actually able to do that in endgame. And they had a really crazy ending with Hen and Vortex where Cold almost peeked over the corner too much when he had minimal HP, but ultimately ended up winning that game. And I think Cold, one of undoubtedly the most underrated players coming into this event, because he had so many great highlight moments. A 1v2 against the Middle East team in one of the final matches is someone that sticks to mind, and some crazy clutches just overall. Mid-map, however, Pars and Rays were to the south of them, taking a bunch of the loot that this drop spot would normally get. So overall, I'm going to spoiler, they placed third at the end of the weekend. However, given how bad their loot is, this is incredibly impressive. Another team that really impressed me on day one was Thomas HD and Trippern. Overall, they had 20 eliminations. However, 18 of these were from Thomas, and he had actually the most damage, being 7,535 total, and the best damage ratio. So for every 1 damage that he took, he was dealing out 2.77. So that's absolutely unbelievable. He was, in my eyes, probably the MVP of day number 1. But that does leave you to go, okay, how come Trippern only got 2 elims on that first day? Is he being carried? I know there's a huge narrative on this, but absolutely not. Day 1, that was just not the case. There's one game where Trippern did go down early and Thomas solo clutched for roughly around 7 minutes, but the 5 other games on that day, Trippern was alive for pretty much exactly the same time as Thomas. So what that actually tells you, more than likely, is that Trippern is just putting Thomas in really good positions to frag out. So his IGLing is doing very, very well in that first day. They started to do a little bit worse on day number 2, but the stats don't lie. Thomas was undoubtedly the MVP on that first day. Of course, this was also an international event, so there was a lot of other regions that we don't usually get to see going up against the biggest in EU and NA East. And one that definitely started to take everyone's notice in day number 1 was Merim and Zagu. They were the most recent FNCS winners from Asia, and they started off, I think, with a 4th with 7 eliminations, and then game number 3, they also had 4 eliminations second. So it seemed like Asia was turning up big time, and I know they were extremely happy about performing really well, but unfortunately after that, they started to do a little bit worse. But they definitely got their names out there. People know who they are, they were watching, and one of the biggest takeaways from, I think, this entire weekend is that Asia aim is crazy. The amount of clips I saw of just max damage pumps from all of the Asia players was unbelievable. And to round off day 1, Cammy and Seti win the final game after also winning game number 1, so not too shabby for them. Their mid and early game strategy was really, really good. They utilized these massive balloons for mobility on the map so well, because what they can do is they can chuck a bunch of white heals at the bottom, a bunch of extra shield. They can use that height verticality from that to increase their line of sight on a lot of the players around them, get a bunch of their storm surge tags, wait in zone because a lot of the players are rotating late, meaning they could tag them in the back, then fly high, go to the next one and repeat. Of course, because there's vaults here, there's a lot of leftover medkits and shield kegs, so they don't even have to waste a lot of their heals while doing this. In one game that didn't work out that well, they managed just to throw a couple of shield bubbles on a boat and make a late rotate in to avoid being sprayed. So their mid-game strategy was super interesting and clearly very well thought out. And of course, there's going to be a bit of controversy when there's RNG in the game. Most of the zones just pulled completely north, and a lot of the teams at the south didn't necessarily do so well. Miro put up a post saying that he got unlucky with the zones, but he did later correct that and say he wasn't complaining, he was just saying it is unlucky, which it was indeed. However, just for future reference, if you ever get bad first zones in a game, it's absolutely not any reason to do poorly, as on that first day, Joe and Ziande were 5th after that, and they're basically the most south team that you can get. In a game like Fortnite, there's going to be zone RNG, you have to prep for it, you have to do it in advance. If you're only going to get points on the times where you pull zone, you ain't getting much. So at the end of day 1, the leaderboard was looking real interesting. Vino and Queasy up in first. There's also some really good representation from NA East, and there's 4 teams in the top 10. There's also KBRNZ, a Brazil team, who were definitely surprising because I don't think a lot of people had put them on their markers at all, but they have some really good previous placements, so I think maybe it's just a sleeper team that a lot of people potentially ignored coming into this. Now there's a lot of discussion around, is Cammy and Seti a day 2 team? I want to squash that beef and say no. Historically, through FNCS history, they actually do better on their second day, getting a few more percentage points on that second day. There have been a few tournaments where they do worse on that second day, but ultimately, if you average it out, we can't just say they're worse on day 2 if they usually get more points on that day. Yeah, and they won the tournament. So day 2 is always the most exciting, and there was definitely a ton of switch-ups that I was not ready for. Number 1 was Hen and Vortex. Now, I'm going to strictly say I expected them to be in the bottom 10. Both of them phenomenal fraggers, actually probably 2 of the best fraggers out there, but their performances together have not been that good. If you know anything about team structure, putting 2 fraggers together, historically not that good of an idea. At the end of day 1, they were in 40th place, and they actually ended up managing to clutch up a top 10 in the second day. If you look at their points overall just on that second day, they gained the second most out of any team, and they were unbelievable. If you look at their stats, the first 4 games, they averaged 9 eliminations a game. So maybe the double fragger together does actually do something that maybe we weren't suspecting yet. I don't know. They managed to just run through the lobby on that second day, which was super cool to see. Massive comeback, and that's actually the second time now that Hen has managed to do that, specifically from 40th place as well, because he did that with Queasy in Chapter 3 Season 2. Another pretty crazy story from the second day was Smite and Larson. Now, on the first day, they've been contested by Muzz and Looter, and that repeated onto that second day as well. However, they got a little emote friendly, you know, a little bit of the highlight moment, get the crowd into it too. However, there was some crazy piece control that went on in game number 11.
Last 2 games were pretty tough, and now he's fighting all the way, and he boxes him up.
I think one of the coolest moments was actually game number 10, where Clicks and Jukes managed to win out, because just quite frankly, this is massive for the fans. He's a huge name, he's a massive content creator, and winning a game on a massive stage like this is fantastic for his audience, and a lot of casual players as well.
He's trying to go for the takes the game!
In a 1v1 situation, Clicks does not let us down.
Before going into the final game, we also got a tease at Chapter 4. So next season is not going to be Chapter 3 Season 5. It's going to be Chapter 4 Season 1. So that's most likely meaning we're going to get a new map too, which is incredibly exciting. Now, Game 11 is where things really took a turn. Of course, Vino and Queasy were first coming into this, and as to no surprise, they were up on high ground, looking to basically win another game. However, because it was coming to the end of the tournament, a lot of players were making much more aggressive plays to try and win a game to move themselves up the lobby. And this created a ton of mess on height whilst Vino and Queasy were trying to take it. Due to that, they ended up going down in 13th, and because it was so messy, Cammy and Seti took advantage of this and just took high ground while everyone had no materials and won the game. This allowed them to catch up massively, taking over, putting them in that first place position with that 12-point lead, with 4 victory royales total to their name. Now, we all know what happened at the start of game number 12. We saw it at the start, and that was when Cammy and Seti secured themselves as FNCS champions and won the entire tournament. So basically, the rest of the game didn't really matter for who won, because we already knew that. The team who really impressed in the final game was Brazil. Peach, Zine, and Ketos ended up placing 5th overall, and Zeet and KBR moved up to 9th, purely with this final match left alone, which is unbelievable. So when you're looking at who's the best smaller region, you know, we often just talk EU, NA East. A lot of people are putting NA West up there, but 2 Brazil teams in the top 10 in an international event like this is incredibly impressive. And the overall leaderboard at the end of the day was very, very interesting. Top 10, 6 of these teams were from EU, 2 were from NA East, and most notably, both of these NA East teams were contested, and then the 2 Brazil teams that we mentioned as well. The highest placing NA West team was Baka and On1 in 24th. The highest placing Asia team was Miram and Zagu, who unfortunately dropped down to 30th on that second day, which was a real shame. And the highest placing Middle East team, a bit kind of hard to say because they only sent 1.5 teams. But Rapid, who was the champion from last season, playing with Andlex, ended up placing 28th, whereas the other full team, which was FKS and Spy, ended up in 49th. And the bottom 5, unfortunately, were all small region teams. In last place was Brazil, and then there was Middle East, and then 3 OCE teams in a row. So it doesn't really bode well for the statement that the smaller teams, of course, have lower quality players than the top, but one land doesn't mean everything. And I think the 2 biggest surprises there were Epic Will and Reet placing 27th, as especially since a lot of people, including myself, put them in their top 10. And then Bug and Miro, 36th overall, when this was another team that a lot of people put in to win the entire event.